Hi, I'm Adam Nimoy, Leonard Nimoy's son, and I am the author of The Most Human, Reconciling with My Father, Leonard Nimoy, my new book about my relationship with my dad. You are listening to The Humanist Trek. Enjoy.
Perhaps I could use this as an excuse to go to those far-off planets with little polka-dotted people if necessary, and be able to talk about love, war, nature, God, sex, all those things that go to make up the excitement of the human condition.
I'm Captain James Kirk.
Spock.
Your move, Captain.
Jim Kirk of the Enterprise.
What's going on?
I'm James Kirk. These people are my friends and my shipmates. Leave my crew alone.
Out of the question.
How about that?
James Kirk.
It fits like a glove, Captain.
Oh, the bonehead ideas.
Gentlemen, I'm Captain James Kirk. Get out of my chair. Get out of it now.
My greetings and felicitations, Captain. So good of you and your officers to, drop in. Absolutely smashing.
Diftor Smusma, and welcome to Humanist Trek, a comedy Star Trek podcast about the humanism in Star Trek. I'm Sarah Ray.
And I'm Allie Ashmead.
And this week we're putting the comedy aside. We interrupt your regularly scheduled programming this week for a very special guest joining us today. It's Adam Nimoy. After 7 years in entertainment law, Adam left to pursue a career in directing, which includes episodes of Star Trek The Next Generation, The Outer Limits, and Babylon 5. In 2016, he produced a documentary about his father, For the Love of Spock. His book released last summer, The Most Human, Reconciling With My Father, Leonard Nimoy. Adam Nimoy, welcome to Humanist Trek.
Welcome.
Well, thank you for having me.
We are so excited to have this conversation. And again, this is kind of a serious topic. The cycles that you talk about need to be talked about more. And so we're excited to be able to highlight that today. And we have a lot to talk about. So let's just jump right on in. The documentary is more focused on stories about my dad. And the book is more about you and your relationship with your dad and how that influences you today. There's something in the human condition that people are fascinated with celebrities and celebrity lives. And I mean, we're keeping up with the Kardashians, for crying out loud. But the fact is, like, you don't owe us any of this. So opening up your private family life in this way, I'm curious what moved you to share these personal experiences so publicly.
Well, I'm glad you asked that question, Sarah. So in the documentary, For the Love of Spock, which we produced in 2016, it was, there's three elements to that documentary. One is the life of Spock, the creation and evolution of the character. Number two is the life of Leonard Nimoy, the artist, the Renaissance man, the philanthropist. And the third element of the documentary was really touching on a little bit about my relationship with my dad and some of the troubles we had and how we managed to reconcile with one another. But the fact is, I'm in 12-step recovery, and this is a story of my relationship with my dad. Is a story of really the tools of recovery, how we were able to use those to reconcile with one another. And it resonates with people at these meetings anonymously. I share this stuff anonymously. So I just felt like I should do the deeper dive and really get into it in a book about what the relationship was like and some of the complications and the difficulties I had with my dad, how that was exacerbated by his alcoholism and my addiction to weed, and how 12-step recovery really was what we needed to kind of reconnect with one another. And that seems to resonate with people.
It does. It definitely does with both of us. As Sarah mentioned, this book is so deeply personal, this account of your relationship with your father. What were some difficult parts? Were there any difficult parts of writing it? Like, what was particularly emotional or difficult about writing it?
Well, the challenge is that I'm dealing with a pop culture icon. I mean, my dad is heavily identified with Mr. Spock, obviously, and there are millions of fans all over the world who just love and adore Leonard Nimoy.
Mm-hmm.
So they don't want to hear any trash talk about Leonard Nimoy. And so that the book really, I had a lot of help. I had an editor, a woman from the publishing industry in New York who knew nothing about Star Trek, to help me really stay on track and be very careful about the way I handle the material, because and the way we, because it's not a laundry list of complaints. It's not mommy dearest. It's not character assessment. It's not blame. It's none of that stuff. And the way I am honest about some of the conflict I had with my dad and some of the things that happened, some of the things he said and did. But I take the thing that was very challenging, and I wanted to really be careful of. I wanted to make clear to everybody that I loved my dad, I admired my dad, that I was always proud of my dad, and that he just didn't have very good modeling from his parents.
Right.
To be a really well-rounded parent, number one, and number two, he was so desperate to survive when he came to LA. I mean, I was born in '56. My dad had a family of four to support, and he was just a struggling actor. There was no financial backing from anybody. His parents didn't want to help him at all. They wanted him to go to college and become a doctor or a lawyer, which is not what he had in mind. So he was completely on his own. And as a consequence of that, the family was not a priority to him. So these are the challenges that we were facing. It's just the way it went down. So I'm trying to be honest about the relationship, and at the same time let people know, believe me, I still love and adore this guy as much as all of you do. I'm a phenomenal Spock fan, like everybody else.
We still love him.
Okay.
Of course. Well, but I think it speaks a lot to the idea that, like, I always say, don't have heroes, because we're all human and we will let you down. Like, and if we start at the baseline of we are all human and we are all going to make mistakes and we're all just trying to figure this out, then we can connect on that commonality. And the way you talk about this relationship, it really struck me when I picked up the book. On the inside jacket, it reads, "Living with Dad was like living with a stranger. As a kid, I often had trouble connecting and relating to him, but I was always proud of him." It's very, very much what you just said. And I thought, wow, that my own life with my own father. I didn't transition until, I don't know, 15 years ago. I was raised as a son. And so I had a lot of this very same father-son relationship with my own dad. He wasn't open with his feelings. That influenced our relationship. For a lot of my life, he worked a third shift factory job, just trying to keep the house and food on the table. And so we didn't see each other a lot. And I guess this is kind of our first cycle here. The book is a lot about cycles, and you talk about this breaking these very old cycles. So here it's truly a silent generation, silent in the fact that they, men weren't allowed to have feelings, and maybe other than anger is okay.
Right.
And cued forbid that you ever show a positive emotion. Mm-hmm. Right.
Yeah, they weren't. My dad was not built that way. Look, my dad's from a certain generation, and he did the best he could. And that's all about recovery. It's like, a lot of stuff went down that was very unpleasant, and I got through it. I had a loving mother. My sister was very supportive. And I was lucky. I had and I had loving grandparents on my mother's side. My dad's parents were in Boston this whole time. So, it's like, I got lucky. I was really lucky. And there's no bitterness. And as I say, there's no judgment that he did the best he could, but he was really difficult. I wouldn't have it any other way, because it was that, single-mindedness and determination and passion and drive that got Leonard to, where he was, that got him the opportunity to play this incredible role that changed all of our lives. So, you just got to take it all. I take it all together. There's, some of the positive and a lot of the positive and some of the negative that came along with it. It's just part of the package. And I would do it all over again if given the opportunity.
Sure. Well, and then the second half of that cycle is us, right? So I really do feel like we're starting to break the cycle, this particular cycle with younger generations. But I think of, like, myself as a parent, as I had kids and became a parent and suddenly realized that none of us know what we're doing. There's no guidebook. We're all just on the fake it till you make it plan, trying to do our best for our kids.
Yeah.
And that really gave me a lot of respect for the way my parents raised me and the choices that they made. And this is perhaps the most important job in human history, is raising children. I've done things differently from the way my parents raised me. You parented your kids differently. And as you say, they still found reasons to hate you.
That's correct.
So it's kind of like we're all just out here doing our best. But do you think we're making a positive progress towards breaking some of these cycles?
Well, yeah. I mean, I think I talk about in the book my relationship with my own kids, and I think it was a much better situation. I mean, I was a very different parent with them because I was just I didn't have the same uh, situation that my dad was in, and I'm just a different person. So I'm very, we still have issues. There's still bumps in the road. As I say in the book, after all I did for my kids, which was really being involved with them and helping them and supportive and helping with homework and taking them to tutor and taking Jonah to his music lessons and coaching, Maddie's soccer team, they still found reasons to be very angry with me. There's still conflict. That's just part of the human condition.
Yeah.
And it's just that we had a much stronger love connection and we were able to work a lot of this stuff out in a way that my dad and I never were able to. And when my kids were teenagers, I had taken the weed element out of it. I wasn't smoking, I wasn't drinking, and I was in 12-step recovery, learning how to grow up and deal with these kind of situations and these issues. So it's very different. I mean, I think we're better. I think we're doing better. I think we're all trying to do better. So I have a very positive view of that at the moment. My daughter just gave birth to a baby girl 4.5 months ago, and she's now
Oh no, she's in it now.
yeah, she's in it now, exactly, and dealing with it on her own, and her daughter won't take a bottle, she wants, and that's and Maddie was that way. She just, we just could not give her a bottle. She wouldn't take a bottle. So, it's kind of a little bit of payback happening now.
Uh-huh.
But I'm really proud of them and what they've accomplished. And they, we have a very close relationship. I'm close to my ex-wife. We've been divorced for 20 years or so, but she's still one of my best friends. We have a very close family. We have extended family. We get together on, major holidays all the time. And it works, even though there's some minor skirmishes here or there, which I try to stay out of because I'm in 12-step recovery and I just don't want to get into it with them. We love everybody.
We on our show, we talk a lot about how much we admire Spock. We totally fangirl when it comes to Spock and his dedication to logic and emotional restraint and his fierce loyalty. And you mentioned in your book that the detachment that you experienced with your father seemed sort of amplified by him playing Spock during those Trek years. Do you feel like the role itself had some sort of influence on how he was in his own life?
Yeah, I'm going to put the book up here so people can see what we're talking about. This is the book, and this is me, cosplay. That's me.
I love it.
This is July '66. This is about 6 weeks before the show even aired.
Wow.
So that's why my claim to fame as the first Trekkie is, right here.
Oh, I love it.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is that there's a lot of Spock and Leonard, and there's a lot of Leonard and Spock. They're kind of hard to separate.
Yeah.
The point I was trying to make in the book is that, my dad was a very introverted guy to begin with, as you guys were talking about, that he had a lot of trouble expressing positive emotion. Negative emotion he was very good with, but I couldn't tell what he was thinking. He was just not a warm, loving, warm and fuzzy kind of guy. That's just not the way he was built because his parents were not that way. And that's the way it was. It was very awkward with him, when I was younger. And so when Spock entered the picture, well, I had sort of this like double whammy, I like to call it, because not only, was I dealing with my dad as a kind of an introverted kind of guy, but Spock is even more contained, more controlled, more withdrawn, more cool and unemotive. And my dad would often say that it was very difficult for him to get in and out of character during those 3 years of Star Trek in production. So, he would come home with his persona and Spock's on top of it. I mean, he was running lines with my mother every night. So he was always kind of in Spock mode. And even, I was talking about, I'm going to post something about I had some pictures of a headshot of Spock and then one of Bill and of Kirk and Spock. And I had my dad sign them. And then after the second one, he said, that's enough, and went right back into Spock mode. I mean, it's so clear in my mind. He went right back into this introverted, controlled, and memorizing his lines. He's always thinking about his lines because that's part of the actor's process. But he's just like, he signed this stuff and it was like, okay, you just broke me out of character and I got to get back into it. So please leave me alone. And it was kind of awesome. So yeah, I'm dealing with Leonard, I'm dealing with Spock, and it's challenging.
Well, another cycle that you talk about in the book is how things like fame, alcohol, and drugs not just contributed to the straining of the relationship, but also became a cycle of its own in you. Talk a little bit more about that cycle and in your life.
I was a very look. One of the reasons I identified Spot with Spock, and that many people do, is because I was an outsider. I was a very introverted kid. I was not a big, I was not popular. I hung out with nerds, weirdos, geeks, and freaks. And I ate my lunch alone in a classroom bungalow at University High School because I couldn't handle the cliques and the social scene. It was too much pressure for me. But when you start smoking dope, and I started smoking at age 17, I was late compared to my friends. Some of them were smoking at 12 and 13, which I can't imagine. But when you start smoking weed, you have an instant community, instant, group of friends, instant party people, and stuff to do on the weekends, and the concerts, the parties, and the hanging out, and then experimenting with other drugs and chasing the Grateful Dead up and down the state of California. I mean, it was a good time, actually. I mean, I really enjoyed myself. But after 30 years, it's just a problem. It just is in my way and clouding my thinking, and I'm just not present, and I'm numbing myself from other issues that I'm having in my life, and one of which was my dad for a while, numbing myself from the difficulty with him, and then it was, I was in a 18-year marriage, and the last years of that marriage were very challenging and very unhappy, and I was smoking weed every day. And the reason why I stopped is because my kids got old enough, they were 12 and 14, they started to realize there was something wrong with me because I was just stoned all the time. And that's when I decided that I needed to think about getting sober. And my dad had gone. My dad stopped drinking in the late '90s. I went sober on the 1st of January 2004, probably about 6 years behind him. And then I started working a program of recovery. And one of a lot of what we deal in recovery is resentment. Resentment is the number one cause of people, getting pissed off at people. It's a real stumbling block. It takes us down, as we say in 12-step recovery. It's just a huge stumbling block to emotional development and personal growth. And that's what I had to deal with my dad. That's when I really had to turn my sights on my dad and figure out what to do, because my biggest resentments were towards him because of the stuff that happened with him.
I connected with that piece of your story and your father's story in my drug of choice was sometimes alcohol, but I smoked cigarettes for far too long. Something I picked up when I was like 15, and I tried multiple times to quit, and trying to do that on your own, it was so impossibly hard. And so the idea of the 12-step program, the idea of having a community, a support system, is so important when you're trying to overcome something as strong as an addiction. And we're only just really starting to do any research around the science behind addiction and how that all works. Like the drug Chantix that basically shuts off the receptors in your brain, that when you smoke a cigarette, it makes you feel some type of way. That's still such a new product, a new science that we're still kind of in our infancy, and there's hope that we'll continue to find new ways to address those challenges. The important thing for me really in reading your story was yes, it's about struggles, and yes, it's about the cycles and the difficult relationships, but there's also a reconciliation. And I love that you and your dad were able to finally hash through some of those things later in life, and be able to have a positive relationship in his final years, which I'm sure he was probably especially grateful for. What was that like?
Well, it was really good, and a lot of it had to do with just letting go of stuff and not trying to prove that he was wrong, and let him just be himself. I mean, there's just certain things he could not we couldn't talk about. There were certain topics of discussion that we just had to leave on the table
Mhm.
and avoid. And that was fine with me. My friend in recovery told me that I could be right about my dad or I could be happy. But if I wanted to be happy, I needed to make an amends to him and reconcile with him about
Mhm.
my part in the relationship that he was not happy with dealing with his resentments towards me. So um, once we got past that, my dad was really much more pleasant person to be around, and we shared a lot of great memories together. As I say in the book, he was really helpful to me when my wife Martha was very sick. My dad, I could lean on him, and he was just a very good friend to me. And one of the highlights was going back to Boston with him when I hired that camera crew to film him walking around town and talking about reminiscing about growing up in that great city because it had such an incredible effect on him and molded him. I mean, he left Boston at age 18, and his experiences there were just a very important part of his life. And I love Boston, and I wanted to honor my dad by going back with him and shooting this video, running around all over the town with him and talking about his memories. So that was another real great bonding experience between us. And then, I became a close confidant of his when it came to the Star Trek movies that he was making with J.J. Abrams. We were always talking about that. And then the documentary, For the Love of Spock, that was a collaboration with my dad initially. We started thinking about that in November of 2014, which was at that point the 50th anniversary of the pilot episode, The Cage, that Dad had starred in and co-starred in. And we were working on the documentary together and having a great time doing that until he suddenly passed away in February of 2015. So really lucky that we just let go of the stuff that we were arguing about. It's just such a waste of time, and I'm really grateful for the years, about 6 or 7 years where we were really close to each other.
And now I know you mentioned, of course, you had trouble connecting with your father, and then but you were always proud of him. And I don't want to give too much of the book away because I do want people to read this. I found it captivating, and I want people to read it. But what's one lesson that your father instilled upon you that has had the biggest impact in your life?
Well, that's a great question. I think the most important thing is to just feel passionate about the work that you do, and I mean that's what Leonard was all about. It was all about the work, and that's why I changed careers from practicing law to going into filmmaking and directing those TV shows. I was so turned off by what the practice of law was all about, and I wanted to do something more creative. So and I found some passion in that in directing. I really, really love storytelling. I mean, that career didn't last long, doing no small part to drugs and alcohol and attitude issues. I was directing in TV for about 10 years, but and I'm always been a writer. So, and pursuing these things that are what our calling is, what our passion is, what our purpose is. This is what Leonard was all about because the fact of the matter is, the odds were stacked against him in terms of success. I mean, this is an 18-year-old boy from Boston with a thick Boston accent coming out to Hollywood to find fame and fortune. I mean, the odds were unlikely that was ever going to happen. But he was so determined because he loved what he was doing so much, and it was all about the work. That's the other thing about Leonard. It's like he didn't, set out to create a pop culture icon. He
Right.
just set out to do good work, and that's same thing that's happening with me now with this book, with promoting my book because I believe in the book. I think it's a good story. It resonates with people. It celebrates our reunification, if I may say so, and I'm doing what he did, which is that I hit the road and I'm showing up and I'm on podcasts like yours and doing interviews and today I'm going to the Saturn Awards with the Roddenberry Entertainment people, just to show up and represent Dad and promote my book and do the work. And that's what Leonard was all about. He just continued to show up for himself and for the work.
Amazing. For me, this book, I found it to be emotional, very beautiful. and it's a deeply honest reflection that I appreciate. It really resonated with me, which I know anyone who reads it is going to resonate with them too. There were some profound insights that I remember specifically from the book: pausing when agitated,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
taking responsibility for your second thought and your first action, which you said several times in the book, and I think it was a lot of it was Justin saying it to you, which
Yeah.
I love Justin, by the way.
I loved him too. Guy was amazing.
Yeah, amazing. I think it was compare and despair.
Yeah. Yeah.
Don't compare yourself to other people. And then, of course, Justin's advice was find una mujer de calidad. Was a very memorable touch. I found myself crying, laughing, all of the emotions as I was reading that book. It was truly inspiring to me, and I just want to thank you for writing it and for sharing such a deeply personal part of your life with us.
Well, thank you, Allie. I mean, I worked really hard on the book. I've been writing all my life, and I published another memoir in '08. It didn't do as well. I wasn't able to promote it the way I have been with this book. I love writing. I love the craft of writing. I've always wanted to be a writer, and I think it's a story worth telling because I'm trying to send a message to people that there's hope in dysfunctional family relationships. That's the whole point, really. I'm trying to be of service to the community. This is part of my recovery. Is trying to spread the word that you don't have to be an addict or an alcoholic to use the tools of recovery, like count to 10, count to 20, pause when agitated. My favorite is always don't just do something, sit there. And the whole point of all that you're alluding to is that it's important not to react to stuff that pisses you off. And I still have this problem. I'm not responsible for my first thought because I'm just an addict in recovery. And when people piss me off, my first thought is not this. It's
Yes.
So,
Yeah.
I'm still a work in progress, which is why I still go to meetings. But it's not recover. Look, everybody's recovering from something. Everybody. It's not just alcohol. It's a failed relationship, a failed career. Recovering from personal loss, recovering from some physical issue that people are having. Recovering from natural disaster. I mean, I'm in LA. We're going to be recovering from the fires for decades.
Oh,
We're all in
absolutely.
it. We're all in it. So the tools of 12-step recovery are just to help people get along and deal with a lot of the challenges of living on this planet. This planet's complicated. Being on Earth, it's really challenging for a lot of people, for everybody, really.
Yeah.
And I've just simply found that the tools of recovery help me get by day and keep some sense of purpose and serenity and just gratitude, stay in the love mode, that's I'm trying to, and it takes work and concentration.
It does. I think we're all walking around hurt and struggling, and it's just not apparent sometimes on the outside, but we are all in need of those tools.
And we've always said about all of our creative projects, if whatever we do, this silly comedy podcast helps one person, it's been time well spent.
Yeah.
And your book definitely has a lot of things that folks can take away and help move the needle on making them better people for themselves and for the people around them. And I just absolutely love that. And Adam, we thank you so much. Appreciate your time and for being so open about your personal and family life. Where can folks find out more about you, pick up a copy of the book, all of those things?
Well, the book is The Most Human, Reconciling With My Father, Leonard Nimoy. And I've got little tags here to remind myself of what's in there. You can get it. Go to your local bookstore, please, folks. We're trying to, I go to the Village Well in Culver City. It's a fabulous independent bookstore. We want to keep those things going. So if you can support your local bookstore, if not, and even online, they may have availability there. Otherwise, just go to the normal places of major bookstore chains or Amazon.com. You can find out more about the book and about what's going on with me and the tour that I have to promote the book at my website, adamnimoy.com. All my social media handles are there as well, and a lot of other wonderful tidbits and information.
Excellent. Thank you so much for joining us today. This was fantastic.
Thank you guys so much. As always, live long and prosper.
That was really, really great. I love Adam so much. He's lived a life, and like I said, I love the willingness to share your experiences. This is something that I've talked about from like when I first started podcasting. The initial show that I launched was "Let me tell you what it's like to be a trans person in the world."
Mm-hmm.
And again, the idea if I can help one person through sharing my experiences and sharing my story, then it was time well spent.
Yeah.
I know that I did. I heard from people that I did. And I know that this book will help people
Yeah.
who are struggling with addiction, with difficult family relationships and all of those things.
Yeah. I don't know that I knew exactly what I was in for when I started reading the book. I didn't know it would be so emotional, and I
Uh-huh.
would feel like I was in it. Like I feel like I know his kids.
Yeah.
I feel like I know Adam. I feel like I know his kids. I feel like I know his wife, his ex-wife, and Martha. And I feel like I know Justin, and I feel like
Yeah.
I know Leonard Nimoy
Yeah.
a little bit more. And even with all the negative things, it doesn't affect my love for Spock or for him.
No. In fact, it colors in
Absolutely.
those lines. We look at celebrities and you have this a picture of what their life is like, and you know it's not
Mhm.
real. It's not right. We all have shit going on.
Oh yeah.
But yeah, it makes him more human.
Human. Yeah,
Mm,
it humanizes Leonard Nimoy, but it also kind of humanizes Spock. Kind of
agreed.
know, so we know where he was coming from when, like, he create, like he that was him. No one else could have played him. No one else could have done Spock. It had to be him.
One of the things that I thought about while we were discussing is like this struggle with addiction. I wish that we were working toward building a society where people aren't so fucking stressed out in the first place
Mhm.
that we feel like we need to turn to harmful coping mechanisms. Like a lot of things can develop into addictions, right? Screen addictions, there's all kinds of different things that you can get addicted to.
Yeah.
And because it's just chemicals in your brain, and most of the time it's us trying to cope with the shit of life. And so like why don't we work towards a life that doesn't have so much shit?
Yeah. Yeah. It's all about escape because life is so shitty. We just do whatever to escape. But I will say also too, it we also need to learn at a young age other coping mechanisms that are healthy.
Right.
Because like if we don't know, we don't learn, maybe we are learning, maybe that's evolved. But like when we were growing up, we didn't learn how to cope with problems, whether it was problems with people, problems internally, mental health. There was no coping mechanisms. There were no tools given,
Yep.
and the only thing there was alcohol. It was an easy escape. It's a lot easier to pick up a drink or pick up a joint than to actually sit with your feelings and face all those things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. And that common feeling of like getting home from a stressful day at work and I just want to unwind and shut my brain down
Hmm.
and not have to worry about the shit that I worry about all the time. I get it. I absolutely get it.
Yeah, yeah.
Did I say this bit earlier about the story of the Nimoys? Like, it doesn't promise a happy ending, right?
No.
Yes, Adam and Leonard made some reconciliation in the end and formed a positive relationship, and it's not guaranteeing that that is an outcome.
Right.
But I feel like Adam is saying, like Star Trek, there are pathways available to us that are more likely to lead to the positive future, and that's something that we need to be watching for and availing ourselves of.
Yeah. And you had talked about like the whole cycle of, family. So your grandparents weren't loved. So they're gonna give that same energy while raising you, and then if you aren't loved, there's a good chance that you're gonna give that same energy when you raise your kids. And we learn how to love. We learn how to parent from our parents.
Mm-hmm.
And if that is dysfunctional, there's a good chance, you're gonna, that is, it's gonna carry on that cycle. And Adam was able to break that cycle. But it did take help, and sometimes it does take outside help, something outside of yourself, whatever it is.
Mm-hmm.
You got to be able to recognize, okay, this isn't right. Here he was a child and just craving his father's like love and attention and acceptance, and he wasn't getting it. And he recognized that, he didn't want to do that to his own children.
Right. We had lots of notes, personal anecdotes and stuff that we related to Adam's story with, and we
Mhm.
didn't have time to get into it while we had him on the line. But I think about my grandfather who served in World War II and saw horribly atrocious things
Yeah.
and never spoke of it. And I respect that, because I feel like, like we said, we're all just going through our own shit and we're all just trying to figure out how to get through.
Yeah.
But I also feel like, had he been able to talk about it, had the feelings that he was dealing with, the post-traumatic stress that would come from that,
Oh, for sure.
had he been able to talk about that with family and process that stuff out loud, I think it would have helped me and my generation in better understanding what happened, what the hell happened,
Right.
because we are so distant from it. Time has passed and I didn't live through it, and I can read about it in a history book, but there's nothing like a firsthand account to really like solidify what the hell happened,
Yeah. And then it would also help you understand him.
Yeah.
Like, as a human being, if he could talk about what happened, how he felt, those kinds of things, it just help you understand
Yeah.
and have deepen that connection that you should have with your grandparents.
Right. Agreed. He mentioned something about eating lunch alone in high school.
Oh, yeah.
And I mean, that almost knocked me on the floor. In high school.
That was me, and I'm wondering, was that every Star Trek person?
Right.
'Cause yeah.
It wasn't, because I had a friend in high school who was a Star Trek person too, but he did eat
He was
lunch.
popular.
Yeah. But like, I remember I would take a lunch meat sandwich or whatever for
Mhm.
lunch every day and hide out in one of the practice rooms in the band room
Mhm.
and eat my sandwich and dick around on the piano. And like, that was just my private little happy space, because I didn't feel like I fit in with anyone else. I wasn't a jock. I wasn't a smart kid. I wasn't a stoner then.
Mhm.
I didn't fit in with any of those groups. And so I just kind of did my thing. But yeah, oh my God, eating lunch alone in high school. Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
if you can imagine little Allie, probably not.
No.
Um,
No.
I was really poor, so I didn't have the nicest clothes or anything like that. And I was painfully shy, and I didn't talk. So I didn't know how to interact with people, and I would eat my lunch really quick. I was sitting alone, and then I'd go to the library, and I would spend the entire lunch period in the library, whereas the other nerds were who didn't have any friends. And I made a couple of good friends there that are still my friends to this day. But that's where I hid out, because I didn't want to feel that horrible feeling when you are sitting alone. Like, I just wanted to eat my lunch, get out of there, and go to the library.
Yeah.
I would recommend people get this book. I mean, it surprised me how really, really good it was, because I like to read fiction, keep it light. But for me to read nonfiction was a step for me, and I really enjoyed it.
The last thing we want to say is, if you are struggling with an addiction, there are a lot of resources out there for you. And I know people who come from the sphere of non-belief tend to have strong feelings about specifically AA and NA. in that they have a higher power component that you're expected to sort of break yourself down first before you build yourself back up. The idea that, that you need outside help to be able to get over this thing. Alcoholics Anonymous works for a lot of people, and that's great. And if that's you and it works for you, fantastic. There are other options out there like Life Ring Recovery, Smart Recovery. There are a lot of programs that approach addiction treatment differently. And what I would say is, if you try one and it doesn't work for you, find another and keep trying, because we want you to get control of your life back, and we want you to be able to mend the relationships that addictions might have harmed. And so any way that you can find to do that will be good. We will include some of those links in the show notes today so that if you're looking for resources for recovery, you can find some of those in our show notes. The book is The Most Human: Reconciling With My Father, Leonard Nimoy. Of course, if you're buying online, we'd like to recommend bookshop.org as an option that supports local independent bookstores. Of course, it is available from most major bookstores as well. And Adam was graciously kind to have provided us with this copy to give away to one of our lucky listeners. So we're going to load the names of our patrons. So it pays to be a patron. We're going to load the names of our patrons into a random number generator and see what comes out. Are you ready to spin the wheel?
Yes. Okay, I'm spinning the wheel.
And the winner of our copy of The Most Human by Adam Nimoy is, drum roll, Stefan.
Oh my God, Stefan! Yay!
Fantastic. Stefan will be in touch to figure out how to get this to you. And congratulations. And for everyone else, we have a link in the show notes as well to order your copy of The Most Human: Reconciling With My Father, Leonard Nimoy. A link to bookshop.org. That will have our affiliate link. That'll hopefully be set up by the time this goes to air. So not only will you get this fantastic book, you'll also be supporting Adam, a local bookstore, and your favorite Star Trek podcast, all in one shot. And next week, we'll return you to our regularly scheduled programming.
Glory to your house.
Make it so, number one.
Humanist Trek is available wherever you replicate your podcast. Follow us on all the social medias at Humanist Trek. Become a patron at patreon.com/Humanist Trek. Open hailing frequencies to podcast@humanisttrek.com and visit our website, humanisttrek.com. Humanist Trek is a production of Sarah Austin Media.